From censored files to clear evidence, this is Redacted Realms.
The journey pursuing the dream and grand vision of President Ho Chi Minh. The nation colonized, oppressed, and exploited for decades. Despite hundreds of struggles erupting to win independence, the situation remained unchanged. The colonialists were still there, with violence, exploitation, and poverty. They earnestly saw a source of light, a glimmer of hope to escape the darkness. And the miracle came after over 4 decades, through countless fierce battles. That nation gained independence, so what was that miracle? In 1911, the ship Amiral Latouche Treville weighed anchor and left Nha port, taking a 21-year-old Vietnamese youth to France, beginning his journey to find a way to save the country. Born into a patriotic Confucian family, grown up in a locality with a tradition of heroic resistance against war, while the entire nation groaned under the exploitation and oppression of the feudal colonial regime. Thus, that young man early on aspired to find a new path for the nation's independence. A path to help the poor peasants escape the brutal domination of colonialism. On one hand, he thought that to hunt a tiger, one must head to the tiger's den. On the other hand, there was fresh colonialism that ruled Vietnam. So right after leaving Nha port, he was determined to go to France and directly explore and research, to see what lay behind the slogans of liberty, equality, and fraternity. Over about 10 years, from 1911 to 1920, he traveled through dozens of countries. From developed capitalist nations to colonies in Africa and Latin America. Through this, he realized that capitalism was cruel and inhumane everywhere. Everywhere, the working class and laborers were brutally exploited. Therefore, imperialism was the enemy everywhere, while the working class and laborers were friends everywhere. By 1930, in British-controlled Hong Kong at the time, the 21-year-old youth of that day had become a middle-aged man. Here, he unified 3 communist organizations, unanimously establishing a unified party, named the Communist Party of. The birth of the Communist Party of Vietnam marked a major turning point in the Vietnamese Revolution, and was the beginning of a bright future for the entire nation. After 92 years, under the party's leadership, our people finally rose up to regain independence and freedom, liberating themselves from colonial and imperialist slavery, unifying the country, and leading the whole nation for socialism. However, his journey was not yet over. In the nearly 10 years that followed, he faced countless hardships and challenges, not only from enemies but also from within the revolutionary ranks. From mid-1931 to 1933, he was imprisoned by the British colonialists. It was not until early 1934 that he escaped prison and returned to Moscow in Russia. Throughout the subsequent period, he had to live in an atmosphere of pervasive suspicion. Amid the upheavals of the international community, it was not until 1941 that he returned to Vietnam and directly led a revolution. And that journey still had no end. By 1942, he again went to China to seek help from Chinese compatriots. It was also from here that he began using the name that, to this day, whenever mentioned, the whole world must respect, admire, and revere Ho Chi Minh. However, here, Ho Chi Minh was imprisoned by the Chiang Kai-shek government on charges of being a spy. He was detained and tormented through 18 prisons across 13 counties in Guangxi Province, China. So terrifying that it was described, the person was tied with a chain around the neck, to swat the police before and after. Guns loaded, bayonets gleaming, at each prison in each county. He was held for a few days then taken away again. The prisons were cramped, filthy, the detainees crowded, with not enough sleeping space for everyone. It was not until receiving a request from the Americans that Ho Chi Minh was freed and returned to Vietnam. At the same time, World War II broke out, and France fell into Hitler's hands. Hitler's ally at the time, Japan, took advantage of that opportunity to advance into the Vietnamese people were now not only living under French rule, but also had to endure another yoke from Japan. Ho Chi Minh and the Viet Minh organization he founded sided with the Allies to fight against Japan. Perhaps after more than 30 years of wandering abroad, Uncle had gained a panoramic view of the world. So any event that occurred, he could predict it decades in advance. While powerful nations like France and Japan were occupying Vietnam for the purpose, but during the war, they exploited and plundered resources massively, severely affecting the lives of the Vietnamese. Our people had to endure the loss of their country and homes, being oppressed from both sides. This explains why thousands of patriotic intellectuals and scholars were outraged by the country's situation, and sought ways to gather forces to overthrow imperialism and liberate it. However, peasant uprising leaders like Hoang Hoa Tham, or the Can Long movement, along with leaders like Phan Den Phung, all patriotic scholars like Phan Boi Chau, Phan Chau Tren, Luong, were all placed under house arrest and neutralized. Some intellectual revolutionaries went abroad to learn from experience and then returned, building bases, gathering forces to carry out their, but none could escape the dense network of spies of the French colonialists. They were all arrested, imprisoned, and many had to go into exile in France. However, at that time, the leader Nguyen Ai Qua, then known as Ho Chi Minh, mobilized mass organizations within the Viet Minh, calling on the people to rise up and fight for independence and freedom. In August 1945, Nazi Germany surrendered to the Allies. In Indochina, Japanese troops were in disarray, and the revolutionary movement across. Seizing that opportunity, Uncle Ho and the party's Central Committee urgently convened the National Party Conference and the National Congress at Tan Trao. There, Uncle advocated launching a nationwide general uprising to seize power. Those were the years when the people rose up to fight for independence and achieve miracles. Under the leadership of President Ho Chi Minh, an outstanding leader. So much so that later, when evaluating the career of President Ho, even historians on the other side of the battle line acknowledged that he was a great man. Not only to the Vietnamese but also to the world. Especially in the August Revolution of 1945. With empty hands, he still led the people to seize power from the imperialists and feudalists, with a broad vision, grasping the world situation, correctly assessing the revolutionary opportunity. Uncle Ho and the Central Committee built forces and led the people, successfully carrying out the August Revolution of 1945, establishing the Democratic Republic, the predecessor of today's Socialist Republic of Vietnam, one of the greatest victories in the Vietnamese Revolution. However, having just gained independence and freedom after nearly a century of war, the people of the South as well as the entire country eagerly desired peace and rebuild their homeland. Yet that desire could not be realized because the French colonialists still plotted to invade our country once again, causing the revolutionary government to face countless difficulties, seemingly insurmountable. Famine raged. The old famine had not been overcome when a new famine was about to occur in 1954. After the victory at Dien Bien Phu, a battle that shook the globe, the war was finally ended, and peace was restored in Indochina. While everyone was jubilant and excited, Uncle alone was the opposite. He told his generals, "Do not rejoice too soon, because the US indirectly helped France occupy Indochina. And when France was defeated, the US would surely take advantage of this opportunity to jump in and invade our country. Therefore, no one should be complacent and must be fully prepared for the plan to resist America." And just as Uncle Ho predicted, everything unfolded exactly according to. Throughout the 10 years from 1954 to 1964, the US replaced France in intervening in South Vietnam. After 4 years from 1961 to 1964, they implemented the Special War Strategy. This was a war using Vietnamese to fight Vietnamese, combining the brutal aggressive tactics of imperialism with modern weapons, technical equipment, and savage terrorist and oppressive measures. In fact, America was even more brutal and powerful as they were strong not only in firepower but also in air power, especially the B-52 Flying Fortress. However, no matter how powerful, America still failed when using B-52s to bomb Hanoi in 1972. Thousands of articles and hundreds of books later had to search for an answer to what strength enabled a country with far inferior economic and military potential to shoot down the B-52, the pride of the United States? And there is only one answer. That victory stemmed from Uncle Ho's genius, intellect, and timeless vision. On September 2, 1969, Uncle Ho passed away, coinciding with National Day. So the Politburo at the time announced it as September 3rd. Only 20 years later were the full text of his will and his actual date of death made public. Throughout his life, Uncle Ho struggled and sacrificed for only one purpose: freedom for the people. Independence for the fatherland. That is all I desire, all I understand. His passing was not only a sorrow for the Vietnamese nation but also for the entire world. Because throughout his journey to find a way to save it and his entire later revolutionary life, President Ho Chi Minh traveled through many countries and regions, both domestic and international. Everywhere he went, every land he passed through, people domestically and internationally clearly felt that he embodied the finest qualities, the crystallization of benevolence, wisdom, and courage. But simplicity, approachability, and sincerity. When remembering Uncle Ho, everyone's heart seems to light up. Not only the Vietnamese people but also international friends who admire President Ho Chi Minh. Everyone hopes to visit him once if they have the chance to come to Vietnam. And after more than 4 decades, Vietnam has risen to become an economic pioneer in Southeast Asia, making countries love Vietnam even more, as well as respect President Ho Chi Minh. The video ends here. I hope you enjoyed it. If you liked it, don't forget to subscribe to Redacted Realms and hit the bell to get the latest updates from E2T. And now, goodbye and see you next time.
If this file opened your eyes, subscribe and open the next case.